What's good, everybody? I'm Jędrek. He's Sodek. Oh, he's Sodek, actually.
Yes.
That's the wall. And today we have our new, vastly improved analytical number, statistic, maths, and every other sciencey word approach to the tier list. And this is an August 2022 edition. Let's go. Alrighty. So back in July, or rather June, and July, and May, and April, and every other tier list that we've made before, we were very subjective as to where we should put different decks. For example, we are known for our, disdain might be too strong of a word, but we are not the biggest fans of blue-white control, for example. And we consistently were putting it in the C tier because we don't like it and we think it's not a very good deck. But we decided that because of this subjective approach, our tier list was very static. And every month basically looked the same because we basically agreed. Maybe not, it wasn't like a spoken agreement, but it was an unsaid agreement that, yeah, we will have Merktide again in the S tier and Sodek decks in C tier and blue-white in C tier because we don't like it. Burn will be in B tier and a bunch of decks will be in A tier. And because of that, there wasn't much diversity from month to month. And we wanted to remedy this. So we decided to try a more numbers-based analytical approach. And we composed a spreadsheet with all the results from the last few weeks of Modo tournaments. We actually have a spreadsheet with all the Modo results in challenges and above from the day Lurus was banned.
By we, Jędrek said that he did it.
Yeah, I did that actually.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Jędrek, for doing this, and you should also thank you in the comments section.
Yeah, you can thank me in the comment. A lot of interesting things that we learned from that data. We will use it many times in the future for many different purposes. But for now, we will be presenting this new way of gauging tiers for different decks. And these rules will be as follows. You can see it on your screen right now. We will always have the last 6 weeks of results in there. So for example, today we have August metagame, so it will be the first week of August, or 5 weekends of July and the last week of June. 6 weekends total. Then we will only improve, not improve, but include Modo results. No paper tournaments, USA, Europe, doesn't matter. There is a bunch of regional bias on both sides, and we commented on this many times. Modo is impartial. Modo is highest quality of players. Modo is basically the best visualization of metagame, in our opinion. Then we have 3 different types of tournaments that we will include: challenges, showcases, and PTQs. Challenges will have a normal way of 1, and showcase and PTQs will count twice as much as challenges. And then we have different amount of points for each placement. So for top 16, you will have half a point if you are top 16 in the challenge, and 3/4 of a point in PTQ or showcase. In top 8, you will have 1 point no matter what type of tournament. In top 4, you will have a point and a half. In top 2, you will have 1.75, and for a win, you will have 2 points. And remember that you double your points for showcases and PTQs. And we are basically taking all the points any given deck made in the last 6 weeks, and then we divide it by the way of all the tournaments. So for example, if we had 10 challenges, 1 PTQ, 1 showcase, total weight is 10 for challenges, 2 for showcase, 2 for PTQ. We divide it by 14. And on that criteria, we will assign a tier. The tiers that we have are still S, A, B, C. And S tier will be 2.5 or higher. A tier will be from 1 to 2.5. B tier will be from 0.6 to 1. And C tier will be from 0.3 to 0.6. And for example, we already mentioned blue-white that we didn't like, so we were always putting it in C tier, and now we have this objective, analytical approach, and blue-white is not even good enough for C tier. So maybe we were right all along. Who knows?
Easy.
And of course, we will still
basically-
have deck to watch.
Yeah, it's like the decks that are like they don't have that big representative to show the great results, or like maybe there is one lone wolf who keeps crashing the MTGO tournaments. So maybe eventually some of these decks to watch will come to the tier list. Basically, in long story short, instead of our opinions about the archetypes and decks, we have all things written in the very clear way. So
Called objective facts, numbers. Yes.
that's true.
Okay. Shall we move to decks to watch then? Or a deck to watch, rather, because we only have one this month. Because there are still decks that we mentioned last time, like Red, Black, and Dying, like Glimpse, Prison Tron. Still interesting, fun decks. But we don't want to double down too much on them. Like, we won't just mention them every other month, because that's not what we are here to do. So we have one new deck to watch, and it's
Like new.
It's a deck that falls squarely into the category that Sodek was already mentioning. By basically one player is playing it on Modo and has had continuous success with it, and it's Blue-White Emeria. And the pilot is a known Belcher player, Bob49. So I think the MOCS that happened early this year, where two people had Mind Grind in their sideboard in Death Shadow for Belcher specifically, kind of broken Bob's resolve to only play Belcher. And they decided to play different decks, and their most successful second deck, other than Belcher, is the Blue-White Emeria deck. So it's basically like a almost mono-white control that splashes some multicolor cards, like Teferi Time Raveler, for example.
Supreme Verdict.
Like Supreme Verdict. So it's a very anti-creature focused control deck. A lot of removal spells, such as Verdict.
Yeah.
And the late game plan of this deck is to have Emeria Sky Ruin, which is a the land from the same cycle as Valakut, but a white one, so from Zendikar. It enters the battlefield tapped, gives white mana, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 7 or more planes, you can return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is a really, really strong ability to have. A very potent inevitability tool to have. So yeah, I think that deck is sweet. I like this type of decks. Maybe not to play myself. I find them clunky, and I'd rather just cantrip and see many cards and stuff. But I can see the draw to this type of deck. It's pretty cool. Sun Titan is a really fun card to play.
Kinda. What's fun after all? Like casting 6/6 for 6 mana?
Yes.
Maybe. Okay, about the deck, like every time I see the deck that has 4 Supreme Verdicts and 33 creatures in an 80 card deck, I really don't understand why it's doing. Like, truth to be told, all the, like, maybe not all, but most of the creatures can cantrip or can generate another form of value, like Trapper Inspector creating a clue, I believe. Yeah,
Yes.
a clue. Or searching the land, exiling a creature, whatever.
Like the
So
Innistrad Midnight Hound All-Star Ambitious Farmhand that's in Bob's 49 deck. I didn't really know what this card is doing
yeah,
until I had to read that card. So maybe you have it in front of you, so maybe you can read it for
Yes.
our viewers.
Yes, Ambitious Farmhand is a 2-mana creature 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you must search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, and put it to your hand. You can pay 3 mana and transform it, and you can activate only if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers. And after you transform it, it's a 3/3 lifelinker. So basically, it's a 2-mana creature that grabs you a land, and from time to time can be a 3/3 lifelinker if you are, lucky enough.
So
Overall, the deck has like 2 big advantages. First one is that it grinds really well. Like it can outgrind for color easily, in my opinion. Maybe not easily, but it's possible, especially with Emeria engine online.
Emeria outgrinds, like the card Emeria, when it's active, it outgrinds everything, basically.
Yeah. So that's really powerful. And the second thing is that the deck has a lot of tools to stop Cascade decks. You have 4 Teferi Time Traveler, you have 4 Ranger Captain of Eos.
That's a good one.
Also,
that's a really, really good card against them because they can't force it or dispute it.
That's kind of hard. Then you have Ephemerate plus Solitude, which is a powerful tool versus Rhinos or versus like Living End. And of course Supreme Verdict. So there are tools to compete with decks. Overall, like with Cascade decks, overall I think that like once again compared to Red Black Undying deck, I think it's like this blue white Emeria is a bit underplayed, and it's a really good solution to the slow meta game.
Yes.
If you think that you will be able to cast your Sun Titan often enough, then you should play this deck.
I think it's not even to slow meta game, but to creature focused meta games. Like this is definitely not the deck you want to play if you expect people showing up with like Belcher or Tron or maybe even Creativity. But if you expect to play against things like the aforementioned Cascade decks, especially Rhinos, I think this deck is really good against Rhinos. It's probably solid against Murktide as well, because there is a lot of removal spells. And even though traditionally I think that Supreme Verdict is not a very good card against Murktide, like it's or maybe not a very good card, it's very, very overhyped against Murktide. I think this deck, because it can present a significant board itself, you kind of have to play into it with more creatures. And then they cast Supreme Verdict, all of their creatures, or not all of them, but most of them already cantripped in some way. So they can just run you out of creatures because they have Solitudes, they have Supreme Verdicts, they probably have other forms of interaction that I'm blanking on currently because I don't have a deck list in front of me, but like Skyclave Apparition probably, I would assume. Solitude, yes.
Ephemerate, March of Otherworldly Light, Supreme Verdict. So there's a lot of removal. Also Ragavan and Teferi.
For Murktide.
So also Ragavan does maybe not close to nothing, because like if you are on a play you can kill Traben Inspector and attack and create some
Ragavan on the play is great against most things. So
but when you are on the draw, there's a big chance that the opponent will have 2 creatures, and at least one of, like, if you go Wall of Foam's Traben Inspector, then it's quite hard to do anything about this.
Yes. So it's a very, I think many blue-white players would make themselves a lot of favors by playing this deck instead of blue-white. I think this is actually committing to what you want to do with white cards in this format. Like, I don't think you want to play blue-white as a like flash deck. Like, it's good sometimes, but more often than not, you will get you will fall behind on tempo because your cards are kind of expensive and you don't have that many catch-up mechanisms. So actually having this play to the board approach of your control-ish, like tap-out control. Yeah, we can agree that this is a tap-out control deck, basically. I do think that a lot of times this will be a better choice than blue-white. And I know that many blue-white people just like holding up counter spell and thinking, I can do anything. I can counter whatever you play. But in reality, you will probably win more if you play this Emiria deck instead. Most of the time. But if the Emiria deck is bad, it's really bad. Like,
True.
If you get paired against those uninteractive combo decks that we mentioned before, you won't win many games. I assume Amulet is probably similar, right? Like Amulet is probably not a very good matchup as well, I would assume.
It should be bad in my opinion. Like you have some ways to kill the Titan. Like you have Solitude, you have March, but this March would have to be huge, so you would have to exile a lot of cards. Like Solitude Ephemerate can be a problem, but then like you also can't ignore constructs, you can't ignore Dryad with Valaku triggers.
Yeah.
And there's like new technology in form of Hydroid Crazies that will...
It's really good
match up
against this
with
deck,
cards.
probably. Yeah.
Because
We'll talk about it more
mono.
later. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, I think that's all we wanted to say about the Blue-White Emiria deck.
Yes.
It's pretty interesting. And if you want to play something new because you are bored with Modern or whatever, I would recommend you trying this deck out. I will be trying a new deck out myself tomorrow on our Modern tournament.
What?
Or maybe not a new deck. I will play the 75 cards that won PT Burn of the Gods in Sean McLaren's hands 8 years ago. And I will play... This deck is so old that you can't play Flooded Strand in it because it wasn't Modern legal at that point.
Nice.
It's really fucking old. And I will cast Lightning Helix and Electrolyze and Sphinx's Revelations. And it will
You know, there's one deck we forgot to
Which one?
mention in decks to watch, but I think it should be like
Okay.
said. We should say something. It's Song of Creation combo.
Yeah, I guess it's a good thing to address it because it kind of built up its hype and then died down in between two of our metagame updates because we haven't said anything about it in July and there is
Because
not
it
much
was
to...
a bit too early to say anything.
Yes. And now it's a
then...
bit too late, but I guess we can say that. So Song of Creation is a combo deck that Canister played for like 2 weeks, let's say. And for a brief moment, I was actually pretty high on it because Canister is a very persuasive person. And he convinced me that it has a good Merktide matchup. And I was like, a combo deck with a good Merktide matchup? I don't know. Okay, maybe it's really a real deal. And I started playing like Narsets in my sideboard and trying to figure out cards that can beat it. And then after like 2 weeks and another O2 drop, Canister said, well, maybe Merktide matchup is not that good. And at this point I was like, whatever. If Canister won't play it, then nobody will play it.
Yeah. I played it yesterday and I went auto drop. So
yeah.
Overall, I think that the deck has a lot of advantages over another combo deck that it looks like it could have a potential. First of all, it's a one card combo deck because you play one card and play one of your 20 other spells and you can go off. Second is that like the engine cards are also good by themselves. Like if your engine card is Pact of Negation, then you can use Pact of Negation or offer. You can't refuse. You can protect this spell. Use these spells to protect your combo.
Yes, you are very good against counter magic, which is kind of unheard of if your main goal is to resolve a 4 mana sorcery speed card. So that's kind of insane. But yeah, I think Canister said that in his stream that this deck would be good if you could have guaranteed Song of Creation in your hand every game. And even having the Glittering Wish approach, which helps a bit because you virtually have 7 copies of Song of Creation, it's still not enough.
I even played one Sterling Groove just to have an 8 copy. But the problem, like, you can use your Pact of Negation only in the Song of Creation turn. And if you go for Glittering Wish and someone counters the tutor instead of the song, then you can't do that much. Maybe you can go for an offer you can't refuse, but then you give them 2 treasures, they can use later on. that's kind of bad. Overall, I think it's always cool to see a new combo deck that will be around for some time, in my opinion, and maybe from time to time we'll see it going like deep in the tournament, because like the potential is here. We just have to maybe find a bit better list, or maybe get just one other card to make it happen, because like the whole concept of the Song of Creation combo started when the Offer You Can't Refuse was spoiled, because then you had an option to jump from 1 to 2 mana and from 2 to more later on. So
And the option of comboing on turn 2, which is also quite important.
yeah, that's kind of cool. So maybe there's something, but like so far, no one had really good result with it. So
Yes, definitely what you said is true, in my opinion, as well. And I just want to sum it up by saying that it's a deck that on a good day is really, 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 really good. Like if you high roll with this deck, you feel unbeatable, basically. If you find your Song of Creations consistently, like it just looks unstoppable when you draw well. But you can't. It's not that consistent. It's not as consistent as I thought at first it was. So yes, watch out for Song of Creation. And if you want to go O2 at your tournament, like Sodek did yesterday, you can try it yourself. Okay, so going to the actual factual portion of our tier list, S tier with all the new changes with our system. We have one deck and it's blue-red. And honestly, I was surprised by how dominant blue-red was in the last 6 weeks. It had more than twice as many points as the second deck on the list. So yes, like blue-red is just ridiculous.
Do you have numbers to say?
Yes.
Because like the difference is just insane, in my opinion.
Yes. So basically, we explained our whole point system just a while ago, and the actual numbers is that blue-red in the last 6 weeks had 55.5 points, and the second deck was Hammer with 27.5. It's more than twice as many points.
So if something had to be in S tier, that's Murktide.
Yeah, Murktide is head and shoulders dominant. Like it's not even close to being close to close. Like it's just such an utter domination. In the last challenge on Sunday, there were 11 Murktide decks in top 20, top 32. 11.
And 3 or 4 in top 8?
I think.
I bet 3. But
I don't think it was 4. I think it was 3. I will tell you in a second.
Okay, and
yes, there was a one in the finals, one in top 8, or one in semis and one in quarters. So
okay, so perfectly balanced.
And we can also see that blue-red, out of the last 11 tournaments, or 13 tournaments rather, won 0, but was in the finals of 6 of them. So not very good at closing, but pretty good at coming close to closing, basically.
Yeah, that's kind of fun, because like this one, imagine like last 6 weeks when like the variance was on the like side of the blue-red, and then we would like hear everywhere that blue-red should be banned or something like this. Like how little it takes to change the whole narrative. Yeah,
it's so easy to form a narrative of, okay, so last 6 weeks Yawgmoth won 3 tournaments, Living End and Rhinos won 2 each, blue-red won 0. So hello, why blue-red should be considered the best deck? And then you see, but actually it was in 6 finals. So
yeah. And then in practice, when you realize then like 2 out of 3 Avmod's wins were by the same person, by Xerk. I want to say hello to him from this spot.
Huge shout out. Like I just don't know. Like he's a bit too good, I think. A bit too good at Magic.
At least it's on MTGO, so we don't have to consider that maybe it was cheating, because it's really hard to cheat on MTGO. But
Well, there are some MTGO grinders that
are doing mean things to others.
paper.
But, yeah,
two of them even in the last week or so.
What? I heard about one, but maybe let's not talk about them.
No. Like it was one current situation and one situation from years ago that kind of resurfaced. But we don't care about drama that much. Maybe in private, but not. Our content is not talking about drama. So let's move to A tier.
Yes.
Because I don't think there is much said about Murktide other than
I think
its dominance is just
the only question is, do you want to play DRC or not? And I was pretty sure that after 2 or 3 months, players would be sure which version is better or not, and it's still not clear. All 3 versions, with DRC, with Ledger Shredder, and hybrid versions are played, and there aren't any significant differences in terms of results
as far as
say which one is better.
Yeah, as far as playing no shredders and DRCs, I think it's basically only Danielakos and people who are maybe their IRL friends or something, they are copying their lists. But the stock Darcy version, I think, is the one that Binu top 2'd the showcase 2 weeks ago at this point, and it was 4 Darcys or 3 Darcys and 2 Shredders. And I think 2 Shredders is at some point we've had a dispute over Discord about how you should build your blue-red deck and which version is the best, yada yada yada. And I said that, in my opinion, I basically made a modo deck that I named Blue-Red Core, and it was 50 cards or something. And I said, if you are playing those 50 cards in your deck, you can't go wrong or too wrong. And of course, some weeks Darcy will be better, some will be worse. But as long as you are playing those cards, like you are playing Ragavan, Iteration, Counterspell, Bubble, Unholy Heat, Bolts, some amount of Shredders, I think 2 is the minimum. I think Shredder gives you a really important angle to have. You don't need 4 always, but you should have at least 2 in my opinion, no matter which version you are playing. If you are playing all those great cards, those are just the best cards in the format, or most of them are the best cards in the format. So yeah, this deck is just insanely strong and insanely consistent. It's
I would say quite the opposite. Okay, maybe not quite the opposite, but I feel that I could pick better cards. If I could think about, better creature than Ledger Shredder, I would maybe find one. But the trick is that this deck has so many cantrip effects that it lets you find what you need very often. And it lets you play fewer runs. That means that you have more fuel later on in the game. And this endless cantrip effects with expressive iteration, it's what's really made this deck really good.
I disagree. Shredder is a really, really good card.
Yeah, for sure. But I
overall, but you said
overall,
that
overall power level of cards isn't as high as, for instance, Hammer is maybe not the best example.
No, but
in paper, Hammer kills you very fast, and it's a feeling of a power. And here you have this 1/3, 2/4 flyer.
Yes, but
that
do you have
does things, but lets you find what you need. That's really.
But isn't Ragavan into Counterspell as much of a feeling of power as playing Hammer? I think it is. If you think about best cards in the format, if you ask yourself or on Twitter or whatever, what's the best card in the format? I think many answers will be Ragavan or Iteration. I think Ragavan and Iteration are top 2 cards in the format, alongside maybe Ren and 6 is another top 3 card. I think Renan 6, when a Renan 6 is good, is like it can win the match basically by itself.
Would you consider leaving it as the most powerful card based on how much impact it has when it resolves?
Like it's very contextual because in the reality of having Grief and Force of Negation, yes, but it's largely built on this. Like I guess you can argue that Renan 6 is good because there are fetch lands, and Ragavan or Expressive Iteration is good because we have Bubble and other cheap cards. But yeah, I think Living End is one of the strongest cards as well. Definitely. Okay, but once again, we don't want to drag on too long. So that's it for the best deck in Modern right now. It's Blue-Red. And I guess we can say that for the sake of impartialness and objectivity and everything we said we want to do, we also composed a data from 6 weeks prior to this 6 weeks period that we analyzed. So from 7 to 12 weeks ago. So basically mid-May to end of June, more or less. And 4-color was the most popular deck then.
True.
And by 4-color, we basically lumped all 4-color decks together. So 4-color Elementals, traditional 4-color with Counterspell, 4-color Delirium, and 4-color Vivian. And if you lump them together, it was the most popular deck. If you have them separately, Blue-Red was still more popular than 4-color Elementals, which was the second most popular deck. And overall, since the Lurus ban, also Blue-Red was the most popular deck by far. Then 4-color second place, once again lumped together. And then third place was Hammer, just barely squeezing out Living End. Okay, so we're already talking about Hammer to some degree, so we can start our A tier with it because it was the best scoring A tier deck we have. It's a very small change in our tier list that probably none of you would mention if I haven't said that, but I have sort of an OCD when it comes to those things. Beforehand, we were listing our tier decks like inside the tier alphabetically, and now they will come from most points to least points in the tier. So that's a very, very small change that I had to mention because that's how I am. Okay, once again, A tier we have Hammer, we have Yawgmoth, we have Living End, 4-color, and Amulet. For the first time, it feels forever. I think we've had Amulet in A tier at some point before, but like many months ago.
When Colossus was released.
Yeah, I think so. So like November or December. So yeah. Yes. Okay. Which of those decks do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about Hammer?
Like Hammer remains unchanged, to be honest. Like outside like the very brave showing of mono white Hammer in hands of
Crusherbot Zła Gra.
Yes, Crusherbot BG. Most other players play blue white, like with some like lone wolves, like for example Laplacian still playing Ingenious Smith for some reason. Like,
while we are on the topic of Laplacian and blue white Hammer,
yes,
below you can find our website, and on this website, by the time you are watching this video, almost assuredly will be a sideboard guide written by none other than Laplacian on blue white Hammer. And what's even better, this won't be the only text about blue white Hammer that will appear on our website. We have reached a deal, let's say, with Laplacian. So he will be writing about Hammer for Mystical Teachings, and we are really, really excited about it because I wouldn't say that Laplacian is the best. I don't think there is like the best Hammer player. Like you can argue Laplacian, Happy Sandwich, Crusherbot, like all of those people they're really, really good. All of them are really, really good. Just like there is no one best Merktide player, I think. In the similar vein.
And what's even more interesting is that the differences between Merktides aren't as big as the differences between Hammer in each player has. Like each player who has the result, like there are multiple great hammer players online, and they all have like different versions of the deck. Like they can have like 10 different cards in the deck, and they still have really good results. That means that maybe the core of the deck is really powerful. So going for Sigarda Side Hammer into
Yes.
and having Esper Sentinel and to
Turn
Saga
2
is
attack you for 10 is very strong. Like
yes. Turn
o-
3
o- of
killing
like
is also great.
3 cards or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah, and
it's really good.
if you combine turn 3 kills and really good grind plan, that's a recipe for a really great deck. Okay, moving
Yes.
on to others.
Jogmoth,
Rim,
Yogmoth.
black guy. Who's a human?
He's a human and he hates other humans.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
He's emo as fuck. Like a lot of like eye shades and black hair.
Yeah, and it remains unchanged. Nothing new happened. Like maybe outside cutting one endurance and immediately going back to 4 by Xerc, but that's it. Living Hand is a bit. No, okay. So the basic concept of Living Hand is the same. You play Force of Negation, bunch of cyclers, Living Hand, that's it. But there are some players who don't play Grief. There are some players who play Grief and even more black cards in form of Arcfiend
Arcfiend of Ifnir. Or Archfiend? I never know how to pronounce it, but
like
the big flying demon that shrinks opposing creatures when you cycle.
5/4 flyer doing things.
And Shriekmaw. I even saw Shriekmaw in those decks.
That's true. Overall, the most the deck that had the best results is the regular version with Grief. Like it won the showcase, I believe.
It won last 3 showcases. Living End won last 3 showcases. That's one of the very interesting pieces of trivia we have thanks to our data.
True. So Living End, like you can change the deck a bit, but it remains absolutely great.
Yeah. Violent Outburst with Force of Negation is just still really good.
Or like Grief with Shardless. That's like, and you return, play another Grief and kill the opponent next
yes,
turn.
Yes. Like, but yeah, I think that's interesting. What you mentioned, that the voices about like people who are saying that Grief is not that good are getting louder and louder. More and more people are trying to play without Griefs, which I think might be good to some extent. I think if you expect, like precisely if you expect endurance, then subtlety is better than Grief. So if you think that the metagame will be really heavy on endurances, so basically like what Titan is a deck that plays endurance and subtlety is really good against it.
Titan and Elementals, I would say.
Elementals, Yawgmoth to some extent. Maybe.
Yeah, but then like in Yawgmoth's case, they quite often tutor for endurance with like some other spells. So
that's true.
Subtlety is not as powerful as it
Rhinos. Rhinos play a lot of endurance. I think some people are playing like 4 main deck endurances. So basically, if you expect green decks, then you can argue that subtlety is better than Grief. I think that's the argument that people are actually citing when they are explaining why they are not playing Grief.
Like, it's more about like endurance is a important piece of the puzzle, but it's more about the ability to play a tempo game when like you threaten the opponent that you can go end of turn cascade and they have to respect it all the time, so you can just play your flash creatures and kill the opponent. I'm very much against this idea because I strongly believe that nowadays it's too easy to stop wacky aggro. If the opponent goes for mid-game Ledger Shredder and connive at least once, then it will stop all of your creatures. It will stop subtlety, endurance, Brazen Borrower, basically everything. So I'm not the biggest fan of going this route, but like Jędrek said, there are some meta games when I could consider, like if there are a lot of green decks and not a lot of blue decks like Murktide, which is not the case at the moment. then maybe this deck can be real, but overall I think that like passing on Grief is just too ambitious.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Like, you don't have to talk me into playing good cards. And I think Grief is a really good card. Okay, 4-color.
4-color. That's
We
a big
already
story.
mentioned that we lumped all 4-color decks together. So basically, because we lumped them together, there is not that much need for us to make them, like, separate them into different categories. But four categories that I included into my spreadsheet was elementals, which was if you are playing Cavern of Souls, you are playing elementals. Delirium, if you are playing Traverse the Elven Vault, you are playing Delirium, and Delirium overrides elementals. So if you are playing both Cavern and Traverse, I put it as Delirium. If you are playing no Cavern and no Traverse, so that mostly mean iteration and counterspell, you are playing regular 4-color, and Vivian is Vivian. Well, and then like other builds of elementals that are not playing Ren and 6, like very old school Flamekin, Harbinger, Unsettled Mariner versions are just elementals, not 4-color elementals. I didn't like included them in this macro archetype. They are not very popular anymore, but still happens from time to time. There is a player, I believe, called Derek714, who was one of the most successful Modo players and paper players with the deck, and they are still popping off from time to time. Mostly in like just after the Lurus ban meta games, like when I was scrolling like 4 months ago, there was a bunch of dead results, but nothing in like latest weeks. So yeah, and we've seen a trend compared like this 6 weeks snippet that we are working on compared to the 6 weeks before it. Elementals were by far the most popular deck beforehand, and now the most popular 4-color deck is, well, 4-color. Followed by 4-color Delirium. Delirium is actually the second one, and then Elementals in third. And Vivian is also always the last one, basically, because not many players plays Vivian.
If we like separate these decks, not all of them would end in C tier. That's like for the last 6 weeks. That was surprising for me because like okay, maybe not that surprising because we saw it coming, because like the deck didn't have any great showings and didn't have many top 8 results, etc. But like the way people like talk about 4-color is that it's extremely powerful. Maybe you should ban Yorion, whatever. Okay, if you want to listen why Yorion shouldn't be banned, ask in comments.
Leave the comment below.
Like Yorion is hyped by everyone, but the results don't show that it's really good. Okay, maybe paper results can show it because like it won 30k somewhere, whatever. Yeah. But the reality is that like the paper events are behind compared in terms of metagame compared to other things. Like maybe it's another interesting idea why paper events are so different compared to MTGO.
I think mostly regional bias. Like I think it's so easy to create like an echo chamber in which, like, for example, in States, we mentioned it many times, like great players like to play 4-color because that's their preferences. Like when I recognize some of those names, I think, okay, they like to play like grindy multicolor midrange /control decks, so they will obviously gravitate towards 4-color, and then they start doing well 4-color and they convince other people to play 4-color, and it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like conversely, in Europe, like there is so little 4-color, like in Poland, for example, with a fairly big scene, I would say, obviously not even close to States, but there's a fairly competitive modern scene in Poland, and there is so few 4-color decks, and it's not because of like card availability issues. Like it's actually like, I think, for example, in Poznań alone, you can build like, I don't know, 5 4-color decks at the same time or whatever, and nobody's playing 4-color because we just don't think 4-color is good.
It's not only like in the local level, but because like I don't remember if 4-color was the most popular deck in Copenhagen or in
Malmö.
Sorry, in Malmö or in Four Seasons in Bologna?
It might be in Four
It
Seasons.
was-
In Malmö, it was definitely Merktide. I remember that in Malmö, Merktide was the most popular deck.
Yeah, and I strongly believe that it was also true for Seasons, but I should check it first.
Yeah,
instead of
basically,
telling it.
we just don't want to include paper results from either continent because I think that both
Of
Europe
these
and
biases, yeah.
yeah, there is a lot of bias. There are a lot of biases. So, but yeah, back to
Okay, Jędrek,
yes,
how about Asia?
we don't know anything about Asia.
Yeah,
like
Asia is there are
I
some
don't have I don't have like willingness to go to Hareruya with Google Translator and like scouring through the results. Even though I respect Japanese deck building tremendously over the years, like I really like looking at those deck lists from time to time, but also they are very, very
hard
maybe
to
not
find,
inbred, but yeah, they are more they are more of an art than like science, I think. But yeah, back to different versions of four color. Definitely something to put in mind that we lump them together, because I think like if you putting like all three roughly same popular variants of four color separate from each other would be a bit fraudulent, because then you would have 3-4 color decks in C tier, and that's like, once again, this tiers before, like general tiers are by most people associated with popularity of decks. Like usually when you see tier lists, they are accompanied by percentages, how much of a metagame is in a given deck. So the measure of tier is popularity. So beforehand, it was basically the other way around in our case. Like we were, of course, in like taking popularity into the account, but we were mostly gauging decks on strength. Like we didn't care that the deck was super popular. If it was bad, in our opinion, we had it lower, and if it was strong but not popular, we had it higher. And now it changed. So, like, if we had different 4-color versions separately, and we had 4-color in C tier, like it's not reflective of how good 4-color is or how popular as an archetype 4-color is. Like of course, different versions of 4-color are a bit different, but how much different are they? Not really. Like they still play somewhat the same. You still need similar cards to beat them. Of course, it will vary from deck to deck, but largely it's the same deck. So putting it together made sense. But for example, Tron, like right now we only have green Tron later on. But for example, we were thinking about having Tron macro archetype as well, just like 4-color. But Green Tron, Eldrazi Tron, and Prison Tron are so different from each other that we've decided to that lumping them together would be like lumping Death Shadow and Merktide or something. So we don't want to do that. Okay. Anything we want to say about the most popular version of 4-color specifically, which is, well, regular 4-color? Not really. Yeah, I think
the only question, like people, like I would love to hear like the ones who argues that Yorion should be banned. What are the reasons why 4-color was not so popular in the last 6 weeks? Because I failed to find a reason why I would like to play 4-color in the first place. Because like people tend to say that it has a really good matchup versus Merktide, which is not true, because like 4-color is more clunky, so it's easier to win on maybe not tempo route, but yeah.
Of course, I was listening to Dominar's Judgment as every week, and they've had a really good episode on how to win your bad matchups, basically. Like I think 2 weeks ago, and they've made a really really good, in my opinion, like this discern between between bad matchups and tough matchups. And tough matchups are matchups that are hard to play. And I think blue-red versus 4-color is a tough matchup for blue-red. If you play it poorly, you will get smashed. But if you are good, like basically, I think the exact like numbers, there are obviously like made up or whatever that they used was that if you are playing 4-color at a 70% capacity, you are pretty close to 100 in the Merktide matchup. Like the skill of the 4-color player is not that important. But if you are playing Merktide at 70% capacity, it's like your win rate will be like 20 or 30% lower than if you are playing at 95% capacity. Like if you are really good at playing Merktide, you will pick and choose moments to trade favorably. Like you know what type of removal they have, you know what type of removal has what type of weaknesses, like for example, ending against Dash Dragavan or ending against Merktide or exiling a card to Solitude Ragavan, which is really bad for 4-color because it's a 2-for-1. So if you are good at playing Merktide and good at picking your spots, you will gain a lot of percentage. There is not a sideboard card, but the advice that I had, like for many of your tough matchups, the best thing you can do is get good. Like if you are good, it's just like, and I think that that's the case because it's something that I couldn't like completely grasp before, but that's what I kind of felt like before as well myself. Like if all the good players are playing 4-color in state, then they are playing against bad Merktide players largely by definition, because most good players are playing 4-color. Of course, there are good Merktide players in states, but once again, many of those Merktide players will be average, and an average Merktide player will get dumpstered by 4-color if they play it not very good. Even if you play it like decently, you will still get dumpstered. Like you have to be really good. So yes, I think back to your question about Yorion and why it should be banned. I think many people want to ban Yorion. Like it's a case for separate video that we will make at some point. Is because companions are bullshit. Like this is my argument for banning Yorion, for example. Companions are bullshit and they should be erased from the game. And I think many people, even if they add some other arguments to it, their core issue is still companions being bullshit, even if they build on top of that. So yeah, I wouldn't read too much into like people wanting to ban Yorion equaling to people think 4-color is broken, even if some people think that that's the case. Yeah. One last thing about 4-color that I wanted to mention is that Delirium versions are still showing up. And it's not like a one-time thing that people were trying to out-mirror the mirror by having consistent access to Emrakul Promise and Game 1. It's actually something that people are doing. They're actually playing Delirium, they're actually playing Traverse, and I think it's mostly because Unholy Hidden Missions Bubble are really good. And that's the most important part. You are having cheaper deck, so Iteration is better in your deck if you're playing Iteration. I think most Delirium lists are playing Iteration. So yeah, you're just playing good cards. Once again, you are winning because you are playing good cards instead of like more arbitrary free drop like Eternal Witness or whatever. So yeah.
No more Eternal Witness. I exactly wanted to say that.
Okay. Amulet is actually the most interesting deck that we have in A tier this month because it had a pretty major overhaul. So it all started in the showcase 2 weeks ago. There was a player named Gurig, Gurig, who do they won it? They definitely top 8 it. I don't think that they won it.
Living End won, yeah?
Yeah, Living End won because they won last 3 showcases. But Gurik top 8 with Amulet. With, I think there were definitely 2 Inferno Titans and 2 Hydroid Crazes in the sideboard. I don't remember if they've had any main deck Hydroid Crazes. I don't think so. And also they were playing Sakura Tribe Elder. So basically, I've been talking or witnessing the discussion between like esteemed Amulet players, mostly Punt and Canister, and they've came to a conclusion that playing Tribe Elders and a lot of Krasis, I think Canister is now playing 4 Krasis in his 75, 2 main deck to sideboard. You actually do have a plan against Merktide that works. Like your plan is to actually play like a ramp deck, not a combo deck. So you play this like 4 or 5 mana Krasis to bridge towards your later turns. You draw like 1 or 2 cards from it. They have to expend a card, and they just run out of resources while you play like a 5/5 or a 4/4 with flying, which will block their creatures, or if you play 2, it can even trade with Murktide. And it's pretty good against Blood Moon because you can just have an island and a forest and play around it. Also, I think the most important point in the Murktide matchup is that Canister starts shaving pacts of Summoner's Pact, which I think is a really big deal because Pact is actively terrible against Murktide. Because if you ever stop Titan that they pacted for, it's basically game over. Because you can go all aggro next turn because they have to pay for the pact. So it was very common after sideboard that they go for pact into Titan, they have cavern from hand, and they're like, haha, you want counterspell, but you had subtlety or you had dress down or some other way to stop it. And the game basically was over on the spot. Even if they can pay for it, you can resolve Jace or double Murktide or double iteration, whatever, it's over. Yeah.
Speaking of subtlety and other effects like this, Hydraulic Crisis has one huge advantage. Its trigger goes when it's cast. I strongly believe it works like this. I will check it again, but I'm pretty sure it works.
I have one thing to say about that. You can look at the camera.
Summary dismissal, that's not fun. Please don't.
No.
6 summary dismissal.
I just found them randomly yesterday when I was looking for Ajani's Vengeance for my Sean McLaren deck. So
nice.
Now I have it on my desk, and I will play them in Murktide sideboard to beat Canister at some point. You know I will.
So when you cast this spell, you gain half life and draw half X cards. So basically, it's a really good card in mid-game situations when you don't have this combo type draw, and it's a really good payoff when you have, for example, 2 amulets because you used Urza's Saga, and you have like Karu plus Arboreal Grazer, and you have like 7 mana to spare.
Yeah, it's basically a split card between a finisher and a Mulch-Shifter that you can't counter. So it's
kind of good.
It's really good against blue decks. So
okay, I'm also really surprised that after all these years, Amulet players like basically Gyurik came to conclusion that Sakura type Elder is the best bridge, because for a long time the best card in this section was Explore, but Explore, like every time I saw people. Amulet people. Amulet players are also people, but mostly Amulet players.
Are they?
Sideboarding? I think they are. When they
I know that Canister is not a human, so at least I know that. But yeah, I think this change that you are mentioning is it's an interesting observation to make, and I think it's mostly coming from what I mentioned before, that you are transitioning from a combo deck to a ramp deck. Because Explore is much more of a combo card than Sakura is, and Sakura is much more of a ramp card.
Yeah, so you exchange the option to go nuts with like 2 or more amulets, and in exchange you get a creature that helps you play around Blood Moon and can block Ragavan for a turn. That's kind of okay.
Yeah, I think you're basically making your deck slightly worse, because a lot of time, Sakura and Explore will be the same card, more or less. It will ramp you 1 mana.
The card trip, yeah?
Come again?
But without a cantrip, though.
No, your cantrip is getting a land. That's still a cantrip. Instead of getting a random card, you are getting a land, and you are guaranteed to have this land. So you are basically playing... It's the same card. You are neutral on resources, and you have 1 more land. Like, yeah, you are as neutral on both cases, yes. You know what I'm talking about. Yes, Explore is a bit better with bounce lands, and Explore has a higher upside for sure. But you are basically making your deck slightly worse against the field while making it much better against Murktide, which is the most popular deck. So I think for as long as Murktide is the most popular deck and the best deck, I think this change is really worth it, and I actually really do like this Amulet build. I'm legit scared to play against it in the coming weeks. Not tomorrow, because tomorrow I will have Tectonic Edge in my deck, but in general.
Easy. Like I also really like the like whole concept of like different sideboard strategy. Like for so many years, Summoner's Pact was the core of the Amulet deck, and no one really tried to cut it because the more primeval titans you have, the better. And suddenly someone said, maybe I don't need this type of effects because I have 4 Cavern of Souls and I can just play uncounterable things. You know what it reminds me? It reminds me modern when we had blue green Urza Mox Opal Oko versus blue green Primeval Titan with Field of the Dead. And the whole idea of this Primeval Titan deck is that you had Thorn Cover of Souls to push Primeval Titan through. This is
And
very
Uro.
similar with Enduro. That's true. But we came to the situation when like Murktide is so popular that tuning your deck to beat it by playing for Cavern of Souls and like more creatures to make it worth, and Hydroid Crazes, which is a beast, so you can play Grazen and Crazes from the same cavern. Is Kaivir also a beast? Yes, it's also a beast. So a lot of beasts in the deck. Make the
You
matchup
already
pretty
looked
good.
at crazy types, but I was about to ask you if you can list all 3 of them, or how many there
Jellyfish,
are, and if you can.
Jellyfish, Hydra, Beast, but I
Yes,
cheated. I just saw it.
yeah, it's actually
Over
pretty good. It's I think my second favorite type line after. You know what's my favorite one?
no.
Legendary artifact equipment jellyfish on reality chip. I feel
Yeah,
it's
that's also cool.
so yeah,
I have
that's pretty
I
good.
have very strong feelings for Snake Elf Druid on Coiling Oracle.
Coiling Oracle.
I was playing blue green opposition deck in extended, and that was cool.
Like that
Maybe not this art exactly,
No.
but it was cool.
It's like
Okay. Overall, I'm like very happy that again. I really like the concept of finding new ways to play the deck that's already settled. Like
you
this happens not that often, but like when it does, it's so cool that someone was able to find a new take on the old
yeah,
deck.
basically you don't have to convince me to try and cut sacred cows from decks because I don't really believe in sacred cows. And Canister is one of the best people in the planet at doing that. I think he's really good at just asking why continuously on things that other people would dismiss, like, yeah, it's obvious. Yeah, you play for Murktides and you play for Pacts and you play I don't know what else. Like, actually, if you want to make significant changes to the archetype, especially in a format that's maybe not stale, but it's settled, I guess is a good way. Like, at this point, most of the decks are this more or less the same for the last few months or even a year. So if you actually want to innovate, you have to keep trying to question things that are basically taken for granted by other people. Like, similar thing happened with Murktide. People started cutting Darcy's, and what? Now not a lot of them are playing Darcy's. So you have to question everything basically when it comes to deck building if you really want to find those great innovations. Because same thing as Sodek said about decks to watch. I think it was before the show started to me that 9 out of 10 times deck to watch will turn out to suck. But once out of 10, it will actually be pretty great. It's similar thing that a known MTG rapper, Patrick Chapin, once rapped that 9 out of 10 decks built by the best suck. And it's a very similar concept here. Like, 9 out of 10 times, cutting the best card from your deck will probably be terrible. But sometimes, one out of 10 times, the remaining one, it will be actually what you need to push it forward. And recognizing when it can happen can be only achieved by trying to do it over and over again and admitting that you made a mistake by trying, or like maybe not mistake by trying, but it wasn't a good idea to cut it. It was a good idea to try, but you have to admit to yourself that, okay, I will go back to what it was before, and this card is actually good. But you have to test the limits if you want to truly innovate. Okay. And we are kind of testing the limits of how long this video can be. We had 2-hour videos at some point, and we definitely wanted to condense them, and we were trying our best. But in the end, if I have to be honest, I like them a bit longer. Like I think we actually can talk about things that are important, and if somebody wants to skim through the timestamps, they can do it still. So I think it's really valuable to hear us talking about things, even if we don't always make that much sense.
Okay, let's talk about B tier instead of talking about why we
talking about
so
talking
much.
Basically. Okay, 2 decks, GDS and Rhinos. It's the first time in months that we don't have Rhinos in A tier. Basically, the last time we don't. Ironically,
when Lurus was.
Yes, ironically, the last time Rhinos weren't in A tier is when GDS was really good. Because it used to be a really, really good matchup for GDS.
With Lurus around.
With Lurus plus explosives and bigger creatures than your creatures and Fotsis and everything. Yeah, it was pretty nightmarish for Rhinos. But so let's start with GDS because I think it's the less interesting ones of those two.
Nothing changed so far. Like I haven't found any significant difference or like any new way to play the deck or have a sideboard option, whatever.
I still think for the most part it's a deck that is trying a bit different approach than Merktide, and you are weaker against everything that Fotsis isn't actively good against. So for example, we already covered 2 deep dives, including Living End, one with Merktide and one with GDS. And GDS is a better deck against Living End because you have Fotsis, and Fotsis is good to have this counter magic Fotsis clock trifecta. And if Fotsis is not something you actively want, then GDS basically loses all of its appeal over Merktide. And I think that's it about the deck. So, Rhinos.
Let's move on.
Yeah, Rhinos.
Okay. Rhinos were kinda higher, and for like even like 3 or 4 weeks ago, Rhinos were considered as one of the best choices, but they suddenly disappeared.
Yeah.
And there are, in my opinion, 2 reasons for that. Like first, like 2 best decks in the format at the moment are not the best matchups for Rhinos. First of all, Blue-Red, Merktide.
Just to interrupt you for a bit, in the 6 weeks before our 6 weeks time period, and we will at some point find a better name for it, Rhinos were actually in C tier.
What?
It was
So they were really low. Then they had its breakout performance for some time, and then it's again.
Yeah, I think they were mostly good for like last 2 weeks or something of the last period and the first 2 weeks of this period, like this.
Yeah, something in this way.
Yes.
And like the fact that it has like quite a challenging matchup versus Blue-Red Merktide and not the easiest matchup versus Hammer makes it a poor choice.
Yeah, I think so.
There are some advantages of Rhinos, like for example, a good Yavmot matchup. But like or
great
like,
Yavmot matchup.
Yeah, really good. Like it's the worst matchup for Yavmot, basically. But I also believe that Amulet should be quite advantaged versus Rhinos.
I think so.
So there are
and is Hammer the worst matchup of Rhinos?
Like
because in that case, we would have Rhinos being the worst matchup for Yawgmoth, Yawgmoth being the worst matchup for Hammer, and Hammer being the worst matchup for Rhinos, and we would have this nice little triangle.
I don't think it's
because Laplacian,
it's true.
Spoiler alert, his guide said that Yawgmoth is the worst matchup for Hammer, and it's a pretty common knowledge at this point that Rhinos is the worst matchup for Yawgmoth. So now we need a Rhinos expert to tell us that Hammer is the worst matchup for Rhinos.
I don't think it's that bad.
If you are the Rhinos expert and you think that Hammer is the worst matchup, tell us in the comments. But if you think that there is another worse matchup than Hammer, then don't tell us, because we don't want to be proven wrong.
I will say otherwise. If you want to write something in comments, do this now.
Okay.
Overall, Rhinos are, like we always said, like they're a solid deck, and this tempo approach is really good. But I believe it's the best moment to play.
Yes. I think actually the tempo approach got significantly worse with Ledger Shredder being around. I think that you can no longer rely on like casting Bone Crusher Giant or something to win that often, because a 3/5 Ledger Shredder will just stop it. So
That's
yeah,
true.
I think Ledger Shredder is a really big deal in the matchup, because although it can be killed by Fury, you need to spend 2 cards to kill it, unless it's really late in the game, but then like you can counter it and everything. But if you tap out on turn 2, the only thing that can kill it is Fury. It will automatically grow to 2/4 if you provided you discard A. It will automatically connive if you cast a Cascade spell, and it will most likely connive again. So a Merctide player will really want it to be 3/5, and most of the time it will be 3/5 if they want it really bad. And then it's pretty hard to deal with it that easily, because even if you borrow it, then you can play it for 2 mana again. Like that's the biggest problem with Merctide as a card, that if they borrow it, you have to expend your graveyard resources again for it. And in the case of Shredder, the investment is just 2 mana. Of course, it have to grow over time, yada yada yada. But yeah, I think Shredder made this matchup even better for Merctide than it was before. So I think that's why the drop off in Rhinos, because I think like Channeler is also not a very good card against Rhinos. It plays into their I want to play Endurance and Bone Crusher Giant plan really, really badly for you and well for Rhinos, because you have more X1s to kill with Fire Ice and Bone Crusher Giant. You have a 3/3 that have to attack into Endurance, and Endurance will just eat it. So yep, I think that this matchup went significantly, or like it got much better, I think, for Blue-Red with the addition of Shredder.
Okay, how about C tier?
We have 3 decks. I was testing you, Sodek, your reaction. Okay, those 3 decks are Burn, Creativity, and Green Tron. So Burn, our evergreen B tier deck, finally got betrayed by numbers and fell off to C tier.
There was a moment when it was in C tier, and
but very, very long ago. It was B tier for the last, I don't know,
3 outcomes.
6 months, probably, something like that. I think.
Maybe.
I think the last time it was in the C tier was around when Amulet was good.
Yeah,
So,
and we also have Amulet in A tier, so maybe there's a correlation to these events.
We can actually see how much, on average, how high Burn was. So Burn on average was a C tier deck on average for the last 4 months, but high C, almost B.
Okay, almost B. So 0.52, so very close to 0.60. Overall, the deck hasn't changed at all. Like nothing new happened. The only tweak was not playing that many Sanctifier and Vec. Like some players opt to not go for this route anymore, mostly because again, Ledger Shredder made it a bit worse in the Merctide matchup. Overall, I don't feel that there's anything else we can say about this deck.
Yes, similar.
Okay,
Darcy is very bad against the card, and Shredder is really good, so that's it.
Whatever.
Creativity. Yes, Creativity.
The deck that happened to be it was somewhere around for some time, but suddenly it started getting results when players cut Teferi Time Raveler from the deck. Right now, I saw the list with Teferi, so kind of cringe. But
But the most popular lists, the two most popular lists are still the Ren and 6 Explore blue-red deck, basically. Like it's blue-red splash Ren and 6 Explore and have 2 swamps to cast Archon. And the Grixis Reanimator version, which I also really like.
Yeah, which persists.
With Persist and Fable. Fable is just such a good card for creativity. It's insane.
Yeah, like
so
Fable
good.
plays in both versions, I believe.
Yeah. And it's so good for the archetype at large because, like, first of all, it makes a lot of tokens. It filters your draws, and
by a lot, we make like 2 plus treasure, so 3 lot.
And then if you flip it, you can actually creativity for 1, for example. Like if you creativity for 2, they kill 1 of your tokens, you get 1 Archon, and then you can start copying.
Easy. Hard to lose.
Hard to lose.
Overall, I'm don't have knowledge about the like. I would love to hear a creativity expert about how the matchup versus top decks look like. What I know is that Living End just crushes creativity, and there's like
Merktide is pretty good at
creativity
against it as well, and I think that the Merktide matchup might be one of the reasons that it's not higher.
So the question is,
I think Hammer is a good matchup. You have a lot of removal.
Archon should be quite good.
Like one Archon wins against Hammer. You have Bolt, Spell Pierces, you have Prismatic Comments, and Ren and 6. You have a bunch of interaction to stop them early on.
We shouldn't maybe guess. Maybe we should think about facts, and we don't know them.
But of course, but we are theory crafting to some extent, right?
Yeah, like based on theory crafting, Yavmot should be a fine matchup, but on the other hand, I can see Yavmot player coming out without.
Yeah, but they have a lot. Once again,
huge problems. But Archon can be neutralized by Undying Creatures. So.
Yeah, but you are still drawing a card. They are discarding a card. You are creating life total delta, which is like the most important thing for Yawgmoth usually. Actually, the delta between life totals. So, like 6-point life swing on Archon is really huge for Yawgmoth's ability to combo.
That's true.
Like if you have infinite combo, of course you will win. But
unless they go for blood artist, yeah.
Yeah, it's one more card.
Overall creativity is somewhere around. It got enough results to be in this tier at all. So
I think
that's a strong showing actually.
Yes.
Based on how new the deck is, at least this take of the deck is. So
yeah, basically, it's if you want to play this like Scapeshift adjacent deck, that's your best bet. Like it's a similar style of combo control deck to what Rack Scapeshift was, or BTL Scapeshift later on. I think it's kind of similar.
Yeah, that's true. But what's the style Green Tron players present? What do you think?
It's styl życia gnoja, as we know in Polish. But yes, I think Tron will be somewhere in the outskirts of Modern forever, basically. Like they would, I don't know. They would have to ban Erza's Tower for Tron to disappear. I think, like over the last few years, Tron shifted from being a Karn Liberated deck to being Karn the Great Creator deck more. I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is, I think, the most insightful thing I can say about Tron.
Yeah, like also, the deck is like, in my opinion, it's much better when Warping Whale is really good, and when you can play like 3 copies, and that's kind of cool.
And free Warping Whales, free Relic of Progenitus, the unwinnable matchup for any Sodek deck.
That's true, and I can't do anything about it. So, turns around, nothing will stop it. But on the other hand, I strongly believe that Tron will never ever be in an A tier, because
I think it will be hard for it to be in B tier even.
That's true. Like the power level of Tron is overshadowed by other newer cards. So
Yes.
hard to maybe
Okay.
with crop rotation around, maybe
With Krobrot,
who knows?
maybe. Who knows? But it's once again, I think Krobrot would make turn 3 Karn more consistent, but once again, it's not what the deck is about anymore, I think. Like it's more about I want to play turn 4 Karn the Great Creator even if I don't have Tron. And I will play those like Warping Whales and Relics to slow you down. And then Karn will carry it. Of course, I can play Karn with 7 mana, so I can get like Coating or Unstanding Bridge immediately. And it's better to have 7 mana than 4 mana. But once again, it's more centered around Karn the Great Creator these days, which I think is the right way to go for the deck. Okay.
To be honest, I would love to hear the new perspective of Green Tron players in 2022, because the deck is around forever, but I feel that the concept and how you play the deck has changed over the time, and
Yes.
I would like to know a bit more about it.
If you are playing Green Tron and you think you know a lot about the deck, or not a lot, if you enjoy it, share your thoughts in the comments with us. Okay, Sodek, anything more we want to add about the tier list? Okay, I guess we already mentioned the low bar for the C tier, and there were some decks that are usually in C tier but haven't met the criteria needed for
this close.
This close. And these decks were Blue-White Control, Belcher, and Blue-White Affinity. That was the three decks that were closest to do that. So
yeah, and
a bit of Sodek decks, a bit of Cringe decks, and then Esper Sentinels on top of that.
I like Affinity too, so it can be my deck too.
It's not your deck. Okay.
Yeah,
So I guess to sum up, once again, we have S tier, Merktide, A tier, Hammer, Yawgmoth, Living End, 4-color and Amulet, B tier, Grixis the Shadow and Rhinos, C tier, Burn, Creativity and Greentron, and decks to watch Blue-White Emiria. If you liked this type of more analytical, objective approach to the tier list, make sure to comment below. And I know that we've said make sure to comment below like 10 times in this video, but this one is actually really, really important because it's a pretty big change of the approach to this type of videos that we tried out, and I personally really, really, really like it. So even if you don't comment, we'll keep doing that. But unless you comment that you don't like it, but I don't think anyone will do that. I think people will either be indifferent or like it. So we'll see. Anyhow, as always, links are down below. Website, Twitter, Twitch, everything. Remember about the Blue-White Hammer guide that's right now on our website. And another A-tier deck will have an expertly written guides on mystical teachings very, very soon. You can guess what it is, but it will be pretty good.
Yeah. Apart from only Hammer, there's also Merktide, Living Hand, and I'm working on Belcher because I like the deck. So if you are looking for the best content and sideboard guides for these decks, just check it out. Also, if you have any questions you want us to answer, write in comments.
Or on Discord. There will be a link to Discord as well. It's open for everybody. So come hang out with us, discuss Magic with us. And yes, questions. Just as Sodek said. We want to make like a mailbag type of video at some point. So we would really like to know what you want us to talk about in the comments. So yeah, comment, be active. Like, subscribe, yada yada, whatever. It helps really much with algorithm. Every YouTuber says that, so I guess we have to do that as well. But yeah, thanks so much for watching this video. It was a lengthy one, but I think it was really worth it. So until we see you next time, take care and bye-bye.
See ya.